Hey everyone! Today we're raging at the 2010s era of Nickelodeon cartoons. As someone who grew up with the golden age of Nick in the early 2000s, I was pretty disappointed with how the channel's content evolved in the 2010s. Becoming a land of mediocrity and a dumpster for licensing, just to sell toys like the Barbie movies, the Winx Club, and multiple DreamWorks adaptations. Let's break down some of the shows that really missed the mark during this period, one by one, and why this is the era of Nick that everyone wishes would have got cancelled. Fanboy and Chum Chum. Let's kick things off with Fanboy and Chum Chum. This show premiered in 2009, right after SpongeBob's Truth or Square Special, and carried over into the early 2010s. It was supposed to be a quirky, humorous series about two overly enthusiastic comic book fans. Honestly, this show could have been something great if it didn't heavily rely on bare-bottom poop and grossed-out humor in their first few episodes. Coupled with their annoying antics, there was no place for fans to really connect with the main characters. Cosplayers having a starring role was kind of a waste of potential. Con jokes were few and far between, as well as integrating the cosplay community more in the show. We never even got to see them out of cosplay, which really could have given that little insight to who they are, making them a little human to the audience. Just like many other shows, everyone wants to see who is behind the mask. Without this element, the constant slapstick and random gags, it just didn't have the same charm that older Nickelodeon cartoons had. And though it still has a strong following to this day and some really funny moments, the show was just one dimension. The animation style was another downside. It wasn't as smooth as viewers were used to. Jimmy Neutron was also a 3D animation, but the animation was smooth and time was put into it. Fanboy and Chum Chum's loud color backgrounds and wobbly characters in a way seemed very rushed and chaotic. Kyle was cool though. Even if the animation was created on purpose to match the energy of the show, it still made it hard to watch for most over the age 8. It felt like the show was trying too hard to be wacky and random, which ultimately made it less enjoyable. It was the first real change of pace for Nickelodeon, but at least we got some memes out of it. Planet Sheen. Planet Sheen was a spin-off of the beloved Jimmy Neutron series, focusing on the character Sheen Estevez. While the original show had a mix of smart humor and interesting science-based adventures, Planet Sheen fell flat. Sheen, who was a great side character, just couldn't carry a show on his own. His over-the-top antics became grating without the balance of other strong characters. The storyline, which followed Sheen's misadventures on an alien planet, lacked the depth and creativity of its predecessor. It felt like the writers were grasping at straws to keep the audience engaged. Instead of expanding on the rich universe of Jimmy Neutron, it felt like Planet Sheen was a rushed attempt to capitalize on the popularity of a secondary character. If they wanted to do this premise, it would have been better to let him land on the land of Ultralord, giving us an inside look of the character that Sheen was so obsessed about. Kind of like a reverse Fat Albert moment being pulled through the TV. Libby is also an overlooked character that would have benefited from being a duo with Sheen in the spin-off. It would have balanced his chaotic character and had a sense of urgency and importance of getting back home. Planet Sheen should have also started off as a movie, where we get the whole gist of how he got to a different planet, just like how we were introduced to Jimmy, taking him out of a side character role and giving him his own leg to stand on. We also got Snub, the chance to explore the galaxies to see old friends and foes. Tough Puppy. Tough Puppy was one of those shows that seemed to rely heavily on its creator's previous success. With Butch Hartman behind it, expectations were high, but unfortunately, it didn't live up to them. The concept of a dim-witted dog working for a secret crime-fighting organization was fun in theory, but the execution didn't quite land. The humor was often more silly than clever, and while the animation was bright and energetic, the show lacked the depth and heart that made Hartman's previous works like Fairly Odd Parents and Danny Phantom so beloved. It felt like the show was just going through the motions without any real substance. And honestly, gave lazy, with this only real fun idea being let's do dogs fighting alongside cats. The show could have been many things with this concept, even along the lines of making our main protagonist, Dudley Puppy, a breed dog that we never get to see due to him being a spy, making him wear different dog breed disguises just like a spy would, picking the perfect look for the occasion kinda like Roger from American Dad, but with a spy purpose. This, with the laziness to name one of your characters Kitty because she's a cat, just shows how much heart really went into the show. Monsters vs. Aliens. Monsters vs. Aliens was based on the DreamWorks movie. And while the film was entertaining, the TV series didn't manage to capture the same magic. The show's humor was more geared toward a younger audience, and the storylines often felt recycled and predictable. The characters, who were interesting and dynamic in the movie, became flat and one-dimensional in the series. The animation was decent, but it wasn't enough to keep the show engaging. It was another case of a movie spin-off that just didn't translate well to television. Not to mention, ignore the ending of that movie where Susan never wanted to be a giant again, but in the stories, she's a giant advocate at this point. Not to mention that the animation is so bad, it kind of reminds me of the Bratz movies in the early 2000s, where they had uncanny expressions. Even though CGI quality has gone way up by that time. Nickelodeon has also used other DreamWorks movies to create shows like the Kung Fu Panda and the Penguins of Madagascar. But this one really didn't need a TV spin-off. Honestly, they would have been much better just doing Megamind. At least with that, the main character is somebody that we did want to see more of. The Winx Club. The Winx Club was already an established show before Nickelodeon got involved. But the 2010s saw Nick taking a big role in the production. While the show had a loyal fan base, the later seasons felt like they were pandering too much to a younger audience. The plots became more simplistic, and the characters lost some of their original depth. Well, not just lost some. Season 4 would completely ignore all the characters' developments of the past seasons, basically creating a new show with the same characters, which kind of missed the opportunity for them to just bring in new girls for this new series, expanding on the world that the original creator had already laid out for them. The animation, which was once vibrant and unique, started to feel more generic. The magical girl theme had potential, but by the 2010s, it seemed like the show was more focused on selling toys than telling a compelling story, losing the original built-in audience they had. The Angry Birds Show. The Angry Birds Show was another series based on a popular franchise, but this one didn't translate well to television either. While the games were simple and fun, the show struggled to expand the concept into something more substantial. The episodes often felt repetitive, with the same basic premise playing out over and over. The humor was very basic, relying on slapstick and visual gags that quickly grew stale. Without strong characters or interesting stories, the show felt more like a series of commercials for the games rather than something with its own identity. It just didn't have a real life outside of the game. Kinda like in Talk and the Power Juju. These video games turned into shows felt more like cash grabs than something to expand in their actual universe, or even something that people actually wanted. Middle School Moguls 2019. Middle School Moguls, a doll and book line turn miniseries, seemed like it was trying to be both educational and entertaining, but it didn't quite hit the mark on either front. The idea of young entrepreneurs was interesting, but the execution felt too forced and preachy. The characters were more like caricatures, lacking the depth needed to make them relatable. The animation style was also pretty standard, nothing that stood out or made the show visually appealing. It was clear the show had good intentions, but it ended up feeling like an after-school special, rather than a genuine Nickelodeon hit. It also felt like it was out of place on Nickelodeon main roster, and could have thrived on different networks such as Disney, Nick Jr., or even Netflix. JoJo Siwa even had a voice role for one of the characters, Josie. A runtime of 22 minutes and 4 episodes, it's not much that can really be expanded on for this show. The Casa Grandes. The Casa Grandes is a spin-off of The Loud House, focusing on the character Ronnie Ann and her extended family. While the show had some heartwarming moments and did a good job of representing a diverse family dynamic, it often felt like it was just riding on the coattails of its predecessor. The humor was similar to The Loud House, but it didn't feel as fresh or original. The characters, while lovable, didn't have the same impact as those in The Loud House. It's a decent show, but it didn't break any new ground. Harvey Beaks. Harvey Beaks was a show that had a lot of potential with its sweet, nature-loving main character. However, it never really took off. The series focused on Harvey's adventures in a magical forest, but the storylines were often too slow-paced and lacked the excitement needed to keep viewers hooked. Harvey Beaks tried to bring back some of the charm of older Nick shows, but didn't quite succeed. And if we're being frank, if you look at a show like Amphibia, where the animation style is very similar, the characters are more fleshed out and a plot is amongst the show. The show also gave us something new and unique. Not only do we get a Thai-American protagonist, we also get to hear a legend like Brenda Song. We also got a whole new world to play with and build. giving us everything that Harvey Beaks lacked in his own show. Legend of Korra. Legend of Korra is a bit of a controversial entry. As the sequel to Avatar: The Last Airbender, it had some incredibly big shoes to fill. While the show had moments of brilliance and stunning animation, it struggled with inconsistent storytelling and character development. The pressure to live up to its predecessor was immense, and it often showed in how the series unfolded. That being said, Legend of Korra did take some bold risks, particularly with its themes and character arcs, but those risks didn't always pay off. The show had a lot of potential, but in the end, it couldn't fully escape the shadow of Avatar. Not only did Korra lose of itself with the will they won't they tropes and constant love triangle storyline between Korra, Asami, and Mako, but the magic was also taken away with the storyline of the spirit world, and how the first Avatar came to be. Though beautiful, it took away the sense of wonder the original series worked so hard to build. And while we all loved Korra and Asami together at the end, we also didn't get a real ending to make everything that Korra went through worthwhile. It honestly left such an open door that we could have gotten another season that could have tied up everything and all the loose ends. Still, as an Avatar fan, I have to say getting more glimpses into the Avatar's world will always be welcome. Welcome to the Wayne. Welcome to the Wayne had an interesting premise, with kids exploring the mysteries of their bizarre apartment building. Think Scooby-Doo means Gravity Falls, but everything spooky is happening inside of the Mystery Machine. It had some creative ideas, but the execution felt uneven. The show tried to blend humor and mystery, but often ended up feeling disjointed, and the characters were quirky, but they didn't have the depth needed to make the show truly engaging. While it wasn't a total miss, Welcome to the Wayne never really found its footing and ultimately failed to make a lasting impact. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Nickelodeon's take on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was a mixed bag. On one hand, it introduced the Turtles to a new generation, with a fresh animation style and some cool new takes on the characters. On the other hand, the series sometimes felt like it was trying too hard to modernize the Turtles, losing some of the charm that made the originals so beloved, especially with magnifying the crush Donnie had on April. The show had its moments, but it also had a lot of filler episodes that didn't contribute much to the overall story. While it wasn't a complete disaster, it didn't quite live up to the high standards set by previous iterations of the franchise. With the core fan base so strong, I don't see TMNT leaving anytime soon, especially with the success of the new movie. Only time will tell how their new series will pan out. Robot and Monster. Robot and Monster had an interesting concept with its odd couple dynamic between a robot and a monster. However, the show struggled to find its audience. The humor was often too juvenile, and the characters, while likable, didn't have enough depth to keep viewers invested. The animation was decent, but it didn't stand out in the crowded field of other animated shows at the time. Robot and Monster had potential, but it should have been on Nick Jr., to be honest. Pinky Malinky, 2019. Pinky Malinky was one of those shows that just didn't seem to know what it wanted to be. The show's mockumentary style was unique, but the content was often too strange and offbeat to be truly enjoyable. The main character, a hot dog, was certainly different, but the novelty wore off quickly. It definitely gave off the amazing world of Gumball vibes, but it just didn't have the connection that we had to Gumball or Darwin. The show gave a very now type of humor, relying heavily on TikTok and social media type of entertainment, leaving it as a novelty and something that couldn't hold his own. The humor was very hit or miss, often relying on bizarre situations and random gags that didn't always land. While the show tried to be quirky and innovative, it ended up feeling more confusing than entertaining. Kung Fu Panda: Legends of Awesomeness. Kung Fu Panda: Legends of Awesomeness was based on the hit DreamWorks movie, but like many film-to-TV adaptations, it struggled to maintain the magic of the original. The show had some fun moments, and it did a decent job of expanding the world of Poe and his friends, but it often felt like it was stretching the concept too thin. The animation was decent, but the storylines were often predictable and lacked the depth and humor of the movies. It was a fun show for younger viewers, but it didn't have the same broad appeal as the films. Henry Danger, the animated series. Although technically the animated series started in 2020, the Henry Danger franchise deserves a mention when talking about the 2010s era of Nickelodeon. Henry Danger, the animated series, tried to capitalize on the success of the live-action series by bringing the characters into a cartoon format. However, the transition wasn't seamless. The animated version lacked the charm and humor that made the original show popular. The animation style was serviceable, but the show's humor and storytelling didn't translate well to an animated format. The plots were often simplistic and failed to capture the energy of the live-action series, making it feel more like an afterthought rather than a fully fleshed-out spin-off. Nickelodeon being a staple in children's entertainment and seeing how much controversy and lack of care for their cartoons these last years is very disheartening. Though the shows didn't give us bottom-of-the-barrel entertainment, it was pretty close. The originality of the original Nicktoons is very much lost with the constant piggybacking of other shows' minimal success and reboots, along with the constant need to keep SpongeBob alive. Though Nickelodeon is not the only network to lose spark within the coming years, they also are not even trying to take risks with new cartoon ideas, which is evident with their missed opportunity of acquiring the rights to Adventure Time, letting it thankfully fall into the hands of Cartoon Network. Even what other lesser-known Nicktoons classics like The Mighty Bee, Cat Scratch, Back at the Barnyard, and Short Like Making Fiends still capture the wacky but interesting characters that we love from Nickelodeon, and even though it wasn't the channel's best work, they still deserve a rewatch. The logo of Nickelodeon had also changed during this time, seeing it move into more of a corporate setting with the change of presidents from Herb Scannell to Sima Zargami. Pair this with Nickelodeon's constant juggling of multiple different channels to try to capitalize off of every demographic. It seemed like the storylines, adult humor, and character development balance that once was in all Nicktoons would be lost. Not to mention Nickelodeon shifted their focus to make more live-action shows after the success of Zoe 101, Drake and Josh, iCarly, and Victorious. It seems like they really did turn their back on animation, even losing some iconic shows to Disney such as Doug, The Miraculous Ladybug, and the old fumble of not acquiring Adventure Time. At the moment, all we're getting is reruns, reboots, Nick Jr., and SpongeBob. The channel feels like it's just grabbing at straws to make sure they can fill time slots, not taking the time to fledge out stories, find new artists, and give platforms to new creators. We now have a new president of the company, which is Brian Robbins. And though his beginning is not as great, hopefully there's still time for him to instill some of the old values of the network, while also taking a new, refreshing approach to the programming. By putting children back at the forefront of the company and stopping the manic cash grabs and obsession with toy sales. But that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching, and be sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. Until next time, read the archive.